Hello lovely people, welcome back to another video in the DIS-TANZEN series. Today I'm very excited to introduce you to my good friend Amy Lou, who will drop some serious knowledge about blended learning and how we can use that for our online lessons. Let's get to it. Hi Amy, and welcome to this channel. I'm really excited to have you here.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. I'm ready to share.
Ready to share, fantastic. And actually the first place we can start is, I know you as a wonderful dancer, and I know you have a lot of teaching experience, and we got into a conversation about blended learning and different approaches to teaching. Could you share with us a little bit about your teaching background, and then maybe we can transition into what those terminologies means?
Okay, so a little bit about my teaching background. I am a formal school teacher. I am certified with my master's degree in teaching from Seattle. So I was trained I'm a US trained teacher. I really started kind of teaching actually at the age of 16, and it's many, many years from now. So I don't need to reveal how old I am. But I have worked with students with disabilities who've had challenges in the visual arts and the performing arts. And then that led into me with a bachelor's degree in visual arts. And then now I have my teaching degree in teaching. And I've been teaching since 2004 in the classroom. I teach mathematics, funny enough, even though I have an art degree. And alongside my teaching, I have also taught 8 years of tennis to tiny tots from the ages 3 to 6. I also am a certified 500-hour certified yoga teacher, and I've taught for 7 years at a yoga studio. And I've worked with adults. And I've also worked with a range of students from low income to extremely ridiculously rich here in Switzerland, and a whole range of spectrums. So in general, I've definitely worked a lot with people throughout my career. My primary focus is mathematics, and interestingly enough, in my mathematics classroom, I blend my background in visual arts and the way I think about visual arts to teach, but also I bring in my instruction as a yoga instructor in how I manage my classroom, how I talk to my students, how I even build relationships. And so in the end, all this stuff kind of comes together for me as a teacher.
Wow, that's a gold mine of knowledge right there. This is great. And
try.
What I really like about this situation is that the goal of this channel is about picking ideas from different places and get inspirations for things for us to try in order to bring some of the magic we have in live classes onto the online domain, because I think we're going to see a lot of that in the upcoming future as well. So we just need to get better at it. So I think with all the different experiences you have from teaching, I think we can pick a lot of good stuff in order to improve our online teaching experience as well.
Yeah, I'll definitely try my best and share what I can.
One of the topics you brought up was a word called blended learning. Can you share a little bit about what it means and why it's important and how we could do it online?
So the idea behind blended learning, and I've done a presentation on this once in Amsterdam and once in Valencia. The idea behind the blended learning classroom is that students, so you are basically giving the student ownership and control of their own learning. You as the teacher, you become more of a facilitator versus being the person in front of, like in the classroom model, we stand in front of the classroom and we teach directly to our students, and they all sit there silently listening to our lecture. In a blended learning classroom, it's a little less about that. It's more about us giving the students a control over the pace that they learn, the place that they learn, the path that they learn, and also their time. Now, of course, in a school setting, it's a little, their time is a bit controlled, but at the same time, there's a chance to let them control that timing. Perhaps they look at things at home, perhaps. Pacing, in general, pacing, it goes into this idea of how fast they learn, because in general, when we think about learning, some of us learn faster, some of us learn slower. Some of us think that the instructor goes too fast and we want to take our time. Sometimes we're like, oh, the instructor goes too slow. I want to go faster. So you give them control over the pace that they learn. Place sometimes, if it's like for example, a video tutorial, they could learn at school, they could learn it at home, they could watch it in the car, on the bus, during a commute, on a train. And the path is the most important part, because basically you have an endpoint in which of something that you want all your students to accomplish. But the path of how they get to that endpoint is going to be different per individual.
Right. That last thing reminds me of just any decent collaboration with somebody where you just talk about the end point, what you want, and not dictate, take these steps exactly to go there.
Exactly.
Reminds me of that idea. One of the goals, or one of the wishes I have for the online learning, is that it doesn't become a poor substitute for the in-class experience, but actually something better. And this sounds like there's a lot of potential to leverage the online medium in order to take advantage of exactly this process you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, for me, I've definitely dove off on the deep end, where I've gone very technological and made my students like learn everything by video, because I was experimenting with basically this whole idea of video learning and video creation. And I've also gone to the opposite end, where I've rebelled against technology, where I taught very traditional in the classroom, very lecture style. So I dove off on two deep ends. And what I've learned from that is basically that there has to be a balance between the two. You can't substitute one for the other, because the thing about learning is that you're working with humans, and humans, the way we are as humans, we're very different. We all think differently, we learn differently. And so you have to keep in mind that in a classroom of like 30, you're going to have students who like to learn via video. You are going to have students who like having that community aspect and learning in groups. And so you can't substitute one or the other. You have to have a bit of both. Right.
And then this way you provide different options and people can pick what works for their learning style.
Yes.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you're going to have that student who really just wants to learn everything independently by themselves. Like my husband, for example, he likes to say when he was a kid, he hated listening to a teacher. He just read the information on the page to the left and did all the problems to the right without really listening to the lecture. Whereas someone like me, I love being in the classroom and interacting with everyone and talking to everyone. And so our modalities of learning are different. And so you have to keep that in mind. Who is your student when you're thinking about creating your instruction?
Right. And the benefit of being online is that we can just provide all these different pathways. We can pre-record videos, we can have live sessions over Zoom, for example, or any other platform.
Yeah. Exactly. And interesting is if you do create like a web page platform, the way you structure it also lets a student kind of see like, oh, I don't have to start with lesson 1. I could even start with video, or I don't have to start with video 1. I could start like, oh, video number 10. And how you also create those videos will then be important, because it's based on your structure.
Right. What would you what has been a sort of formula that works for you when it comes to these videos in the first place?
Well, a formula, I mean, when I think about a formula, I have to think about lesson planning, right? So when it comes to lesson planning, so what that means is that you basically have like a big idea that you want to teach. And to get that big, for example, if you want to teach something like the Big Apple, the Big Apple is basically, you have your Big Apple, you have your Tranky-Do, you got your Shim Sham. So the Big Apple, I would consider a unit. The Tranky-Do, I would consider a unit, and the Shim Sham is a unit. Within the Big Apple, what are all the micro lessons, that the chapters that you have to teach, those skills that get them to meet the learning objective of the Big Apple? So then what I would do is I would then say, okay, I'm teaching Big Apple. what do I need to create? I need to create videos on this jazz step, this jazz step, just jazz, and this jazz step, and then also how it all liaisons together. And then from there, because you basically broke it down into micro pieces, that leads into this big unit. And then once that's done and the student has gone through all the lessons, then they can move on to the tranky-do.
Right. That's a nice idea, because most sort of, for example, solo jazz routines like the Big Apple, when people are teaching them, they are pretty much going from the beginning to end. They're like, okay, this is the first move, let's start there, and then we go chronologically towards the end. But what I'm also what I'm taking from what you're saying is, if you know the goal, you know the content that needs to be taught, but then you can actually mix and match differently first, and then lead them into that, so that it doesn't have to be a chronological routine learning, but first similar movements maybe in one bundle, and then difficult connections in another bundle, and then tackle those differently, or make it an option to tackle those first or in different orders, and then the routine as a sequence as another choice later or earlier, whatever that they prefer.
Yeah. Exactly, because the idea, like for example, the Shimshan is quite easy to learn. The tranky-do becomes a little bit harder. Then the Big Apple is just a really long sequence of things that you have to memorize. For a student, in order to really learn that Big Apple routine, they got to understand each individual jazz step. Once they understand each individual jazz step, then they're able to understand transitions. And transitions are the hardest part between jazz steps, because they're essentially moving their own body, having to figure out how one thing flows into another thing. So if you're able to have them have a deep comprehension of each individual jazz step, then eventually when it comes to, okay, let's sequence the first 4/8 together of the Big Apple, then all of a sudden it makes a little more sense to them. Because if you just go right straight in from the very beginning without just teaching it from beginning to end, they might struggle with even the first step. They might be better at the second step, but then they can never get to the second step because they struggle with the first step. And so it's like, how do you break it apart into micro pieces so they feel successful, and then therefore building their confidence to put everything together?
Nice.
And it gives them, the experience to feel enough success to build enough sort of reservoir of encouragement and motivation to tackle the more difficult bits and pieces of the sequence, for example, of the routine.
Yeah, exactly. Because the thing is about learning is that if a student doesn't feel accomplished at a certain point, that's when they're more likely to give up. However, if you introduce things in a way in which the students feel accomplished, they'll keep wanting to come back because they understand. Then it's like, okay, what's the next thing? And then what's the next thing? Then all of a sudden, they've magically learned the whole Big Apple sequence almost magically with ease.
Right.
What would be some other ideas that you would want to share with people about bringing blended learning concepts to the online medium for dance teachers?
Okay. So when it comes to teaching online, we have two aspects that we're thinking about. We're thinking about teaching via videos that we pre-record in advance. And we also think about teaching through live lessons where everyone's on Zoom and you have your community there. And so the aspect of blended learning in the two will look a little bit different. And so blended learning, naturally works very well with pre-recorded lessons, because you record things that people move at their own pace, at their own time. They pick their own path and, their place, wherever they learn. They could learn in the office if they're in the office.
Exactly.
But when it comes to a live recorded classroom, blended learning, you have to think about it a little bit differently. And so we have those aspects of path, place, pace, and time. Okay, so the time is very specified because it's a live lesson. You're teaching either in the afternoon, you're teaching in the evening. So that already is one aspect that's a little bit taken out of their control. When it comes to pacing, you as an instructor, you're teaching it in a certain pace. And so it is teacher pace. And so it's directed teaching. However, one thing that you could do to give them a little bit of ownership as you are doing live teaching is think about their path. Okay, so you have a big picture of what is the end movement, the end group of movements or moves that you want them to do. And because at the same time, we are also trying to maximize our potential number of clients that are online, we are also offering mixed level lessons. And so one thing we need to think about when we're offering these live lessons is that path. Okay, we want them to eventually get to, for example, in Balboa, we teach the toss out. Okay, so the basic toss out is basically the end goal. However, you have your students who are maybe more intermediate level, who might struggle to get that full circular rotation, who might struggle to make that connection, who might struggle to go from a rebound and naturally rebound the other direction to create a full movement. Okay, so what you have to do is then you have to set the base, you set the foundation for those students. At the same time, for those students who I would say would be the exceeding expectations students, the ones who kind of know what's going on. I mean, realistically, these students are also, everyone could always refine their basics. Now, the question is, what can you add into your instruction? What can you say in your instruction that gives them something extra to think about? Like, can you think about a tightness, a more deeper rotation, how close the partnership is in the movement? Because the thing is, the intermediate student is just basically, can I get the movement? The advanced student, the exceeding expectation student is, how do I make this more fluid within everything that I do? And so their path is going to be slightly different because they're going to be thinking about slightly different things. But the end result is they're all going to get a toss out. Yes.
So you would, if we stay with this for a little bit, so we're talking about the context of live online sessions, and yes. You would, when you're as a teacher preparing your class, you want to think about ahead of time, what are some things I can ask for the slow learners to focus on? What are the things I can ask the intermediate tempo learners to focus on? What are some things I can ask for the fast learners to focus on within the same movement, so they all feel like they can pick what they want? So you would say something like, okay, if you want an extra challenge, try to achieve this while you do the same thing, for example. Mm-hmm. So you would provide different options for them to take based on where they are at themselves in their learning, without taking away from the other person, without stressing the slow learners and so on. Yeah, nice.
Yeah, and so that gives them something to think about, gives them control over their learning. And funny enough, what you may offer as a thought for those who are in the intermediate level, actually, the advanced dancers might be thinking about that. And so they get to choose that path of thinking more like an intermediate dancer, because maybe there's something that they didn't figure out when they were at that level, but then all of a sudden it like, oh, that makes more sense to me. I don't really want to do the advanced option. I actually want to do the intermediate option because that sounds like something I need right now. Whereas the intermediate student might be like, I want to try to do the advanced option, and maybe they're not quite ready for it. But I mean, realistically, as teachers, we say, okay, maybe they don't have the movements for it. However, if they choose themselves to pick that path of doing the advanced movement, a side effect of that is it challenges them to maybe work on the intermediate aspects of that movement to get to that advanced option. So maybe along the way, they actually pick up those things to get there. So when you give them the choice, you give them the choice of their path, you really are giving them their ownership of what they want from their lesson. And so it makes them feel like when they come out that they got something, they feel more successful.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I really love this approach for teaching, because different people, different journeys.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in the end, you have a big picture and you want them to all meet the big picture. It's just you have to think about those points of what does every individual need? Let them choose. If they choose the easier path, okay. If they choose the hard path, okay. But it's their choice.
Yeah, exactly. Is there anything else you would like to share?
One thing that I feel that we need to think about as teachers of teaching online is this aspect of how do we bring people online. Because the problem is right now is we're all pretty much stuck inside, and a lot of people are pretty much working from their computers all day. And so the last thing they want to do after spending like 8 hours on their computer is to spend more time on their computer learning from a screen.
Yeah.
And so one thing we need to think about is, you know, how do we add value to what it is that we do online? And so we have to think about like our types of learners. You're going to have the type of learner who maybe has spent all day online for 8 hours doing their work, and then they're just like, forget it, I don't want to go online, you know, I'm done being in front of a screen. However, what if that student is, after those 8 hours of work, said, okay, maybe after I take an hour break, you know, maybe I want to go online and learn some lessons. But perhaps that's not the time that you're teaching a live lesson. Perhaps maybe that's when you offer that student some video options so that they can learn from the videos themselves. Perhaps one day, maybe you teach a lesson that's many hours later and they're like maybe more motivated to do it. And so they come on. The other thing is, I think we have to think about, you know, how long are our lessons? So for example, if we offer, for example, there are some teachers who are doing mini dance sessions first thing in the morning for like 5 minutes, and that gets people moving. And so like short increments of time is another thing to think about when it comes to how do we entice people to try to get online, because it's true. I mean, for me, like at the end of the day, I mean, even though I am teaching live in the classroom, I don't know if I necessarily want to go back on screen. And then you also have you also have those students who just enjoy the video lessons, but there's also the students who actually want the reason why they come to swing dance is because of community. So some of them they haven't been practicing, they haven't really been doing any dance lately. And one of the aspects that has lured them in the first place to dance is because this aspect of community. So when we offer these maybe live sessions, perhaps it's a gathering for them, and maybe that will entice them. Perhaps you could do social gatherings online. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of like these online gatherings, but at the same time, when it's on Zoom, it's a little complicated because when one person speaks, no one else can speak. It's a little bit complicated. Yeah. But I think we have to think about the types of people that we're trying to bring in. I think if we're going to continue doing this online modality, some things to think about is, do shorter increments work? How do we make it feel easy for them? How do we, because the thing is, it's more like we have to lure them a little bit. Yes.
Yeah, actually, I would like to add to that. I had this conversation with one lady who struggled a lot with going online at first, but then she just needed a reframing of the situation to say, oh, this online session is gonna be me time. And she told her family, like, the living room is mine and mine alone for the duration of this time. Nobody can enter there, and made her little own sanctuary out of a space that usually wouldn't be, and she wouldn't usually have this privacy. And just that reframing made that as a gem, as this moment of the day where she felt extra empowered from, and connected that to the online experience that she had. So that really helped her to really looking forward to those sessions as well. So I think helping people putting perspective to the online experience as well as the dancing could really improve their experience, could really improve their experience they're having while they go online.
I think one thing we could also think about is, you know, right now, like for example, here in Switzerland, all our gyms are closed. I mean, any fitness facility is closed. And I don't know, for me, naturally, I'm thinking and I'm assuming there's a lot of people who are not moving their bodies at all right now. And therefore it's really unhealthy for the body to move. So something we could think about as instructors, as a community, is how do we get people in general just moving? So maybe the goal of our dance instruction isn't to make them master a move or make them master a sequence. It's how do you just get them to gain more body awareness and move every part of their body in relation to the content that you're teaching, in relation to swing.
we have this thing where we do in our session where it's actually the last step of the process. So it's once we've done the training, we had a moment of sitting down and just have a community moment together. The last thing that happens is like 30 seconds of our favorite pop song and just let loose, and everybody just shake it off, and it might be Kiss from Prince or something like that, and it just yeah, we just move and enjoy having that motion in our body, so to say, and then we stop from after that. That's really, really enjoyable.
And that's great. I mean, because in the end, you're helping people, because they might have been, I mean, it's true. We're all here. We're not really moving. We're stuck on our screens. But when you get people to dance to a pop song and just move, however, with no need to be correct, it just move. You're basically ending on a good note where it's like, oh, I feel great after this. I want to come back for more.
Exactly. Exactly.
Before we depart, is there anything you would like to plug in? What are you teaching? Where can people learn from you? How can they follow you?
Well, Alex and I teach here in Geneva for Geneva Swing. We teach mostly Balboa and collegiate shag. Currently, we do not have any online classes. However, when things pick up again, we will hopefully get a chance to start teaching and sharing our knowledge. Maybe once in a while you might find us teaching something online. Just keep an eye out on us. You can follow us on Amy Alex Swing on Instagram and also on our Facebook.
Great.
Thank you again one more time, Amy, for being here and sharing your knowledge with this community.
No problem. I'm happy to share. And if you guys have more questions, you're welcome just to message me, and I'm more than happy to nerd out on teaching with you.